We're going to talk about a few final things that you need to know in order to be able to read Greek off a page. First, if a word begins with a vowel or a diphthong, it's going to have either a rough or smooth breathing above that vowel or diphthong. So a rough breathing is shaped like that. A smooth breathing is shaped like that. A rough breathing indicates that the word starts with an H sound, it's aspirated. And a smooth breathing indicates that it doesn't start with an H sound, that it's unaspirated. So let's look at some examples to make this clear. First, a couple of words that have rough breathings over them. Hamartia, which means an error or a mistake. So you see the rough breathing there over the initial alpha, hamartia. And hedus, it's an adjective, it means sweet. We get the English hedonism from it. And again, it's got this rough breathing over the initial eta. Now, some words that have smooth breathings. First, adelphos, it's got this smooth breathing above the initial alpha, adelphos. Now this one begins with a diphthong, and you can see if you have a breathing over a diphthong, the breathing appears over the second vowel. This word is eirene, eirene, which means peace. We get the name Irene from that. And finally, Aphrodite. Aphrodite begins with a capital letter because it's a proper noun. It's the name Aphrodite. And when you have a breathing with a capital letter, it appears in front of that letter rather than on top of it. Next, punctuation. Generally speaking, the punctuation you'll see in our ancient Greek text looks like English punctuation with two big differences. A question mark looks like an English semicolon. And then functioning to separate clauses within a sentence, like an English semicolon, is a raised dot. So it appears a little above the line. So I don't know, I'll just write a word here. Adelphos. Right? And if you wanted to put a raised dot, it would go right there. Okay, and that again works like an English semicolon. Now, accents. There are a lot of rules about what Greek accents, how they work, where they move around on a word, where they can be and can't be. And we'll accumulate knowledge of those rules as we go along. But let's talk about the names for the three kinds of accents you might see above a word. So there's the acute accent that goes that way, the grave accent that goes that way, and the circumflex, which either looks like this or like this, depending on what font you're using. I tend to write them like this when I write by hand, but a lot of the fonts you'll see write them like that. Okay, so what the Greek accents mean, well, what they meant, they're pitch accents. And so an acute accent means that you're raising the pitch on that syllable, either a third or a fifth. A circumflex accent means that the pitch is raised and then lowered over the same syllable. And that's why circumflexes can appear only over long vowels or diphthongs because they take longer to say. And then a grave accent means on a syllable where you might have expected a raising of pitch, you either get no raise of pitch or less of a raise of pitch. Opinions differ. All right, so let's look at where they can all appear. Now, an acute accent, right, can appear over any of the last three syllables of a word. It's allowed to be over any of those three syllables. So here's some examples. Alethes. Alethes means true. It's an adjective. Hyreo means I take. And dekatos, tenth. So Alethés. So you can see that I didn't pronounce that like a pitch accent. Instead, I did what most English speakers of Greek do, which is I just put the stress wherever the accent is. And that's how most people learning Greek do it. If you're interested in learning to read with a pitch accent, that's totally possible. And there's lots of um, resources for doing that. But we're going to just put the stress wherever the accent is, no matter what kind of accent it is. So alethes, hyreo, dekatos. Okay, that's the acute accent, which is allowed to appear over any of the last three syllables of a word. By the way, all these last three syllables have names. The last syllable of a word is called the ultima. The second to last syllable is called the penult, and the third to last syllable is called the antepenult. So an acute accent can appear over the ultima, the penult, or the antepenult of a word. A grave accent happens when a word that would normally have an acute accent on its final syllable, on its ultima, is followed immediately by another word. So here's a word, aner. It means man. And you can see it has an acute accent on its ultima. But when we follow it immediately with another word, aner aristos, that acute accent on the ultima changes to a grave because aner is followed immediately by another word. Okay? So a grave accent, which meant originally either no raise of pitch where you would have expected or less of a raise of pitch, happens when one word is followed immediately by another word. Okay. Finally, the circumflex accent. Now it can appear, as I said before, only over long vowels or diphthongs because it involved a raising and a lowering of pitch over the same syllable. It can also appear only over the last two syllables of a word. So it can appear, whoops, it can appear over the ultima, gay, which means earth, or over the penult, as here, doulos, but it can't appear over the third to last syllable. It can't appear over the antepenult. Okay, so gay, there it's appearing over a long vowel. Doulos, there it's appearing over a diphthong. Okay, and that's a circumflex accent. And that's all the rest of the stuff you need to know to begin reading Greek words off a page.